Maya Kim woke up at 5:30 in the morning, just like she did every school day. The small apartment was still dark and quiet. Her mother had already left for her first cleaning job at the office building downtown. Her father would not come home from driving his taxi until 7 in the morning. Maya was used to being alone in the early hours. She walked to the tiny bathroom and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. Her school uniform hung on the back of the door. It was one of 3 outfits she wore to school. She rotated them carefully throughout the week. On Mondays and Thursdays, she wore the blue jeans with the small hole in the knee and the gray sweater. On Tuesdays and Fridays, she wore the black pants and white shirt. On Wednesdays, she wore her only dress, a simple navy blue one that her mother had bought at a thrift store 2 years ago. It was getting tight now, but Maya made it work. After getting dressed, Maya made herself a simple breakfast of toast and water. There was no butter or jam in the refrigerator. Those things were too expensive. She packed her worn backpack carefully. The backpack was brown and had several patches where her mother had sewn up the holes. Maya did not mind. It still worked fine for carrying her books. The walk to the bus stop took 15 minutes. Maya liked this quiet time in the morning. She could think about her dreams. She wanted to be a doctor someday. She wanted to help people who could not afford medical care. She wanted to make her parents proud. They worked so hard to give her a chance at a better life. At Riverside High School, Maya was a freshman. She was 14 years old and very smart. Her grades were mostly excellent. She got A's in math, science, history, and her other classes. But there was one class where she struggled. English literature with Mrs. Patricia Henderson. Mrs. Henderson had been teaching at Riverside High for 20 years. She was 52 years old with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes. She wore expensive clothes and always carried a designer handbag. Many students were afraid of her because she was very strict. She gave hard assignments and expected perfect work. Maya tried her best in English class, but something always felt wrong. Mrs. Henderson never seemed to like her work. No matter how hard Maya studied or how carefully she wrote her essays, she always got low grades. C-, D+, sometimes even worse. The biggest problem was the books. Mrs. Henderson required students to buy specific editions of classic novels. These books cost money that Maya's family did not have. Maya had to wait for the books to be available at the public library. Sometimes she had to wait weeks. By the time she got the books, the class had already moved ahead. She was always trying to catch up. Maya sat in the 3rd row of Mrs. Henderson's classroom. She watched as the teacher called on other students to answer questions. The white students in class seemed to get all the attention. When they raised their hands, Mrs. Henderson smiled and called on them quickly. When they gave answers, even wrong answers, Mrs. Henderson said things like "good try" or "interesting perspective." But when Maya raised her hand, something different happened. Mrs. Henderson would look right past her as if she was invisible. Sometimes Maya kept her hand up for the entire discussion, and the teacher never called on her. Other times, when Mrs. Henderson did call on Maya, she would dismiss her answer quickly. "Not quite right, Maya," Mrs. Henderson would say, even when Maya knew her answer was correct. Then the teacher would call on a white student who would give almost the same answer, and Mrs. Henderson would praise it as excellent. Maya noticed other things too. There were 3 other students of color in the advanced English class. There was James, a black student who sat in the back. There was Priya, an Indian American girl who loved poetry. And there was Miguel, whose family had come from Mexico. All of them seemed to have the same experience as Maya. They raised their hands and got ignored. They worked hard and got low grades. They made small mistakes and got harsh criticism. Meanwhile, the white students in class seemed to have an easier time. Maya watched as a girl named Brittany came to class late at least twice a week. She always had an excuse about soccer practice or a student council meeting. Mrs. Henderson would just smile and wave her to her seat. "No problem, Brittany. Just try to be on time next time." But when Maya was late once because her bus broke down, Mrs. Henderson made her stand in the hallway for the entire class period. Maya had tried to explain about the bus, but the teacher had not wanted to hear it. "Punctuality is a sign of respect, Maya," Mrs. Henderson had said coldly. "If you cannot manage your time properly, perhaps you should leave earlier." Maya had wanted to say that she already left home at 6:15 in the morning. She wanted to say that she could not control when the city bus broke down, but she said nothing. She just stood in the hallway, missing the lesson, feeling ashamed. The worst part was not just the grades or the ignored hand-raising. It was the comments Mrs. Henderson made. They were small comments said quietly, but they hurt deeply. Once, when Maya wore the same outfit 2 days in a row because her other clothes were still wet from washing, Mrs. Henderson had pulled her aside after class. "Maya, personal presentation is important for academic success," the teacher had said, looking at Maya's clothes with obvious disapproval. "You should put more effort into your appearance." Maya had felt her face burn with embarrassment. She wanted to say that she washed her clothes by hand because the laundromat cost too much money. She wanted to say that she only had 3 outfits and did the best she could. But the words stuck in her throat. Another time, during a parent-teacher conference, Maya's mother had come to school still wearing her cleaning uniform because she could not afford to miss work to go home and change first. Maya had seen the way Mrs. Henderson looked at her mother. The teacher's nose had wrinkled slightly as if she smelled something bad. She had spoken slowly to Maya's mother, as if she thought the woman could not understand English well, even though Maya's mother spoke perfectly fine English. "Maya needs to work harder," Mrs. Henderson had told her mother. "Some students come from backgrounds that prepare them better for academic rigor. Maya will need to put in extra effort to keep up." Maya's mother had nodded politely, but later that night, Maya heard her crying in the bathroom. Her mother blamed herself. She thought she was not giving Maya enough support. But Maya knew the truth. She was working as hard as any student in that class. The problem was not her effort. The problem was how the teacher saw her. In the cafeteria, Maya usually sat alone. She did not buy lunch because she needed to save money. Sometimes she brought a sandwich from home, but often she just drank water and waited for the lunch period to end. She used the time to study or read ahead for her classes. One day, a girl named Jessica Park sat down next to her. Jessica was Korean American like Maya, but her family was wealthy. Her parents were both doctors. Jessica wore designer clothes and always had the newest phone. "Hi," Jessica said, setting down her lunch tray. "You're in my English class, right?" Maya nodded, surprised. Jessica had never spoken to her before. "I've noticed something," Jessica said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Mrs. Henderson treats you differently. She treats James and Priya and Miguel differently, too." "Has she always been like this?" Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Someone else had noticed. She was not imagining it. "Yes," Maya said softly. "All semester." "I don't know what to do about it," Jessica frowned. "That's not right. Have you told anyone? Your parents? The counselor?" Maya shook her head. "My parents work all the time. They already have so much stress. And I'm afraid if I complain, it will make things worse. What if Mrs. Henderson finds out? What if she fails me? That could affect my college applications." Jessica looked thoughtful. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. But I understand why you're scared." The two girls sat together in silence for a moment. Maya felt grateful for Jessica's kindness, but she also felt hopeless. What could anyone really do? Mrs. Henderson was a respected teacher with 20 years of experience. Maya was just a poor freshman with no power. What Maya did not know was that someone else had noticed the problems in Mrs. Henderson's classroom. Principal David Martinez had received 3 anonymous emails over the past 2 months. The emails described a pattern of unfair treatment toward minority students and poor students in Mrs. Henderson's class. They gave specific examples of different standards for different students. Principal Martinez was troubled by these emails, but he needed proof. He could not discipline a teacher based on anonymous complaints alone. He needed to see the behavior for himself, so he made a difficult decision. After consulting with the school board and the district's legal team, he installed a small security camera in Mrs. Henderson's classroom. The camera was hidden in the corner near the ceiling, disguised as part of the smoke detector. It recorded everything that happened during class time. Only Principal Martinez and the superintendent knew about the camera. They kept it secret because they wanted to see Mrs. Henderson's natural behavior. If she knew she was being watched, she might act differently. The camera had been recording for 2 weeks now, and what it showed was deeply disturbing. Principal Martinez watched the footage every evening in his office, taking careful notes. He documented times, dates, and specific incidents. He was building a case. But he knew he had to be patient. He needed overwhelming evidence before he could act. The teachers' union was powerful, and Mrs. Henderson would surely fight any accusations. Principal Martinez needed proof that could not be disputed. Meanwhile, Maya went home each day feeling more discouraged. She studied hard for her English assignments, but she felt like nothing she did was good enough. She was starting to believe that maybe Mrs. Henderson was right. Maybe she was not smart enough for advanced classes. Maybe students from her background were not meant for academic success. But deep in her heart, Maya knew that was not true. She was just as smart and capable as any other student. She deserved the same chances and the same respect. She just needed someone to believe in her. And soon, someone would. Principal David Martinez sat in his office after school hours watching the security camera footage from Mrs. Henderson's classroom. He had a yellow notepad beside him where he wrote down everything he observed. Timestamps, student names, exact words spoken. His expression grew more troubled with each passing day of recorded footage. The camera had been recording for 3 weeks now. What Martinez saw confirmed his worst fears. There was a clear and consistent pattern of discrimination. On Monday at 10:15 in the morning, Maya had raised her hand to answer a question about the symbolism in a poem. Her hand was up for 4 full minutes. Mrs. Henderson looked directly at her twice but called on other students instead. When a white student named Connor gave an answer that was similar to what Maya would have said, Mrs. Henderson called it brilliant. Martinez wrote in his notes, October 14th, 10:15 a.m., student Maya Kim ignored despite raised hand for 4 minutes. Similar answer from white student praised extensively. On Tuesday, Mrs. Henderson was handing back essays about Shakespeare. The camera caught her comments to different students. When she gave papers to white students, she spoke encouragingly even when the grades were average. Nice effort. Emma, I can see you're really thinking about the themes, she said, handing back a B- paper. Good work. Tyler, your analysis is getting stronger, she said to another student with a B. But when she reached Maya's desk, her tone changed completely. She placed the paper face down and said loudly enough for nearby students to hear, This is disappointing, Maya. You're not showing the level of understanding I expect. See me after class. Maya's paper had a C- marked in red at the top. Maya's face showed embarrassment and confusion. The camera captured her picking up the paper with shaking hands. Martinez paused the video and read his own copy of Maya's essay. He had requested copies of all her work from the attendance office, claiming it was for a routine academic review. As he read Maya's analysis of Romeo and Juliet, he found it thoughtful and well-written. It certainly deserved better than a C-. He made another note. October 15th, Maya Kim essay graded C-. Quality appears to merit B or higher. Teacher's verbal feedback harsh and public. The pattern continued day after day. When James, the black student, asked to go to the bathroom, Mrs. Henderson made him wait until the end of class, saying he should have gone during passing period. But when a white student named Ashley asked the same thing 10 minutes later, Mrs. Henderson immediately said yes with a smile. When Priya mispronounced a word while reading aloud, Mrs. Henderson interrupted her sharply. Priya, if you had prepared properly, you would know how to pronounce that word. Pay more attention. But when a white student stumbled over multiple words, Mrs. Henderson gently corrected him and said everyone makes mistakes when reading aloud. Miguel turned in an assignment one day late because he had been helping his family at their restaurant. Mrs. Henderson marked him down a full letter grade and lectured him about responsibility. A white student named Brad turned in the same assignment 3 days late because he went on a ski trip with his family. Mrs. Henderson accepted it with no penalty, saying she understood that family time was important. Martinez documented everything. By the end of the 3rd week, he had over 30 specific incidents recorded in his notes. But he knew he needed more than his own observations. He needed other voices. He began calling students into his office for what he described as routine check-ins. He started with students who were not in Mrs. Henderson's class, asking general questions about their school experience. Then he moved to students who were in her class. How are your classes going this semester? He would ask casually. Most students said things were fine, but when he asked specific questions, patterns emerged. Do you feel like all your teachers treat students fairly? He asked. Some students hesitated. A few nodded. But several students, especially students of color, looked down or changed the subject. He spoke with James privately. Is there anything you want to tell me about any of your classes? Anything that concerns you? James was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke carefully. I don't want to get in trouble. You won't get in trouble for being honest, Martinez assured him. English class is really hard, James said slowly. Not the work. I can do the work. But it feels like Mrs. Henderson doesn't think I can. She always seems disappointed in me, even when I try my best, and she never calls on me in discussions. It's like she doesn't think I have anything valuable to say. Martinez wrote down everything. He asked more questions. James described the same patterns Maya had experienced. Different standards, harsh criticism, being ignored or dismissed. Priya told a similar story when Martinez spoke with her. I love English and I love reading, she said. But I don't love that class anymore. I feel like no matter what I do, it's not good enough. And I notice that some students can make mistakes and get praised for trying. But when I make a mistake, I get criticized. The white students Martinez interviewed had different experiences. They described Mrs. Henderson as strict but fair. They said she had high standards but was supportive. They felt challenged but encouraged. None of them reported feeling unfairly treated or targeted. One white student, a girl named Sophie, said something that caught Martinez's attention. Mrs. Henderson is really nice to students who care about learning. I think some students just don't put in enough effort and then blame the teacher. Martinez asked carefully, which students do you think don't put in enough effort? Sophie shrugged. You know, some of the scholarship kids, the ones who are only here because of diversity programs, they're probably not used to this level of rigor. Martinez felt a chill. The bias was not just coming from Mrs. Henderson, it was spreading to students too. He decided to reach out beyond current students. He contacted recent graduates who had been in Mrs. Henderson's classes. Most did not respond, but one did. Her name was Lena Johnson. She had graduated 2 years ago and was now at a state university. Lena agreed to meet with Martinez at a coffee shop near campus. She brought a notebook full of her own documentation from her time in Mrs. Henderson's class. I never reported this because I was afraid, Lena explained. I thought no one would believe me. Mrs. Henderson has been at that school forever. She's respected. I was just a black girl from the South Side with no power. Lena's notebook contained dated entries describing incidents very similar to what Maya was experiencing now. Different grading standards. Public humiliation. Ignored contributions. Dismissed concerns. I got a C in her class, Lena said. A C in English, which is my best subject. I'm an English major now in college and I have a 3.8 GPA. But in high school, Mrs. Henderson made me feel stupid. She made me feel like I didn't belong in advanced classes. Martinez felt anger building in his chest. How many students had suffered like this? How many had been discouraged from pursuing their dreams because of one teacher's prejudice? Back at school, he contacted the district's Human Resources Department. He explained the situation and requested an official investigator. The district sent Dr. Sarah Chen, an experienced HR professional who specialized in discrimination cases. Dr. Chen spent a week reviewing all the camera footage. She watched hours of classroom recordings, taking her own detailed notes. She also reviewed student work and grade records. Her findings matched Martinez's observations. She identified over 35 specific incidents of disparate treatment. She created comparison charts showing how similar assignments received different grades based on the student's race and economic background. One chart compared essays on The Great Gatsby. Maya's essay had received a C- with comments about lacking sophistication and not understanding upper-class dynamics. White student named Preston had written an essay of similar length and quality. His essay received an A- with comments about insightful analysis and strong grasp of complex themes. Dr. Chen had both essays reviewed by 3 independent English teachers from other districts. All 3 rated Maya's essay as equal to or better than Preston's essay. The grade discrepancy could not be explained by quality of work. Another comparison showed discipline records. In one semester, Mrs. Henderson had sent 7 students to the office for minor infractions. 6 of those 7 students were students of color. White students who committed the same infractions, like talking during class or forgetting homework, received only verbal warnings. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Chen prepared a formal report documenting systemic bias and discriminatory behavior. She recommended immediate action. Meanwhile, Maya was unaware that any investigation was happening. She continued to struggle in English class. The latest assignment was a major essay on social class and American literature. Students could choose any book from the approved reading list. Maya chose The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. She felt connected to the story of a poor family trying to survive. She spent 2 weeks on the essay, working late into the night. She wrote about how economic hardship affects families. She analyzed how society often blames poor people for their poverty instead of examining systemic problems. Her essay was personal and powerful. She poured her heart into every paragraph. When she turned it in, she felt proud of her work. For the first time all semester, she thought she might have written something that even Mrs. Henderson would have to recognize as good. She was wrong. When Mrs. Henderson handed back the essays, Maya's heart sank. Another C-. The comments written in red ink were harsh, overly emotional and lacking objectivity. Your personal biases prevent you from analyzing the text properly. This reads like a personal complaint rather than literary analysis. Maya felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked around the room. Preston had gotten an A. His essay was about the Great Gatsby and wealthy families. Mrs. Henderson had praised it as mature and sophisticated. Maya noticed that all the students of color in the class had received low grades on this assignment. James got a D+, Priya got a C, Miguel got a C-, but the white students had mostly A's and B's. During lunch, Jessica found Maya sitting alone, staring at her essay with tears running down her face. She hated it, Maya said quietly. I worked so hard and she hated it. Jessica looked at the grade and the comments. She looked at Maya's essay. Can I read this? She asked. Maya nodded. Jessica read the entire essay carefully. When she finished, she looked angry. Maya, this is really good, Jessica said firmly. This is better than the essay I wrote and I got a B+. This is definitely not C- work. But Mrs. Henderson said it was too emotional and biased, Maya said. That's ridiculous, Jessica replied. Literary analysis can include personal perspective. That's what makes it interesting. And you supported every point with evidence from the text. This is exactly what she asked us to do. Jessica made a decision. I'm going to start documenting everything that happens in that class. I'm going to write down every time she treats you differently from other students. And I'm going to encourage James and Priya and Miguel to do the same. We need evidence. What good will that do? Maya asked hopelessly. Who's going to believe us against a teacher with 20 years of experience? I don't know, Jessica admitted. But we have to try. What she's doing is wrong, and wrong things don't get fixed if everyone stays silent. What neither of them knew was that Principal Martinez already had all the evidence he needed. He was meeting with Superintendent Williams the next morning to present his findings and recommend disciplinary action. The investigation was nearly complete. Soon, Mrs. Henderson would face the consequences of her actions. Soon Maya and the other students would get the justice they deserved. But first, the situation was about to get worse. Mrs. Henderson was about to cross a line that would make her behavior impossible to deny or defend. And this time, it would be captured on camera for everyone to see. The next Wednesday started like any other day in Mrs. Henderson's English class. Students took their seats as the bell rang. Maya sat in her usual spot in the third row, her notebook open and ready. She had prepared carefully for today's class discussion about social mobility in American literature. Mrs. Henderson stood at the front of the classroom wearing a cream-colored blazer and pearl necklace. She looked polished and professional as always. Today we will discuss the concept of the American dream as portrayed in our recent readings, she announced. I want to hear your thoughts on whether hard work truly leads to success in the stories we have studied. Several hands went up immediately. Mrs. Henderson called on Connor first. I think the books show that anyone can succeed if they work hard enough, Connor said. The characters who try hard usually do well in the end. Interesting perspective, Connor, Mrs. Henderson said with an approving nod. Who else has thoughts? Maya raised her hand. She had spent hours thinking about this topic. She had her own experiences with working hard despite obstacles. She had insights to share. But Mrs. Henderson looked past her and called on Emma instead. Emma talked about self-reliance and individual responsibility. Mrs. Henderson praised her answer as thoughtful. More students shared opinions. Maya kept her hand raised, but the teacher continued to ignore her. Finally, after 15 minutes, Mrs. Henderson seemed to run out of other students to call on. Yes, Maya, she said with a slight sigh as if Maya was bothering her. Maya took a breath and spoke clearly. I think the books show that hard work matters, but it is not enough by itself. The characters face barriers that have nothing to do with their effort. Like in The Grapes of Wrath, The Joad family works extremely hard, but the economic system is unfair to them. Or in The Great Gatsby, Gatsby works hard and makes money, but society still does not accept him because of his background. These books suggest that social class and economic barriers affect who succeeds, not just individual effort. The classroom was quiet for a moment. Several students nodded. Maya felt proud of her answer. She had supported it with specific examples from the texts, but Mrs. Henderson's face showed clear disapproval. She crossed her arms and looked at Maya with cold eyes. "Well, Maya," she said slowly, "perhaps if you spent less time making excuses and more time actually reading the material, you might understand the real themes here." Maya felt like she had been slapped. "But I did read the material," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I read both books twice. I was using examples from the texts to support my point." Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. "I have been teaching English for 20 years. I know when students are prepared and when they are not. Your answer shows a fundamental misunderstanding of American literature. Maybe you should focus on classes more suited to your background." The words hung in the air like poison. Every student in the room understood the implication. Maya felt her face burning with shame and anger. Her background. What did that mean? Her economic background? Her racial background? Either way, the message was clear. Mrs. Henderson thought Maya did not belong in this advanced class. Maya wanted to defend herself, but her throat felt tight. She could not find words. She looked down at her desk, blinking back tears. Jessica, sitting 2 rows over, could not stay silent. "Mrs. Henderson, I thought Maya's answer was really insightful," Jessica said firmly. "She used specific examples from the books, and her analysis about structural barriers is actually supported by literary criticism." Mrs. Henderson turned her sharp gaze to Jessica, but her expression softened slightly. "Jessica, you are different," the teacher said. "Your family clearly understands the value of education and proper preparation. You have been raised to think analytically. Not all students have those advantages." The distinction was crystal clear. Jessica was Korean American, just like Maya. But Jessica came from a wealthy family, and that made her acceptable in Mrs. Henderson's eyes. Maya came from a poor family, and that made her unworthy. The class continued, but Maya barely heard the rest of the discussion. She felt humiliated and angry. Around her, some students whispered to each other. Others looked uncomfortable. A few white students seemed unbothered, as if they saw nothing wrong with what had just happened. When the bell finally rang, Maya gathered her books quickly. She wanted to get out of the classroom as fast as possible. But as she stood up, Mrs. Henderson called out, "Maya, stay behind, please. We need to discuss your performance in this class." Maya's stomach dropped. She waited while the other students filed out. Jessica gave her a supportive look before leaving. Soon only Maya and Mrs. Henderson remained in the room. The hidden camera in the corner continued recording everything. Mrs. Henderson sat on the edge of her desk and looked at Maya with an expression that tried to seem concerned, but came across as condescending. "Maya, I think we need to have an honest conversation about whether you belong in advanced English." "I do belong here," Maya said quietly. "My grades in my other classes are all A's." "English requires different skills," Mrs. Henderson replied. "It requires cultural literacy and sophisticated thinking. Some students naturally have these abilities because of their upbringing. Others struggle because they come from backgrounds that do not emphasize intellectual development." Maya felt anger rising in her chest, pushing past the shame. "Are you saying I am not smart enough for this class?" "I am saying you are not prepared for this level of rigor," Mrs. Henderson corrected. "There is no shame in that. Not everyone can excel at everything. Perhaps you should consider moving to a standard English class where the material might be more appropriate for you." "My test scores were high enough for advanced placement," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "I was selected for this class based on my abilities." Finally, he played yesterday's footage. Williams watched in silence as Mrs. Henderson dismissed Maya's thoughtful answer, told her to focus on classes suited to her background, and then had the private conversation suggesting Maya did not belong in advanced classes due to her upbringing. When the footage ended, Williams sat back in her chair with a grim expression. "This is worse than I expected," she said quietly. "The evidence is overwhelming. We have clear documentation of discriminatory behavior, creating a hostile learning environment. and potential violation of civil rights laws. What are our next steps? Martinez asked. Williams thought carefully. We need to act quickly but properly. If we do this wrong, the teachers' union will tear us apart in arbitration. We need to follow every policy and procedure exactly. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Within an hour, 3 people arrived at the school. Dr. Sarah Chen, the HR investigator, returned to present her findings in person. Mark Stevens, the district's legal counsel, came to advise on proper procedures. And David Park, the union representative, arrived to ensure teachers' rights were protected throughout the process. They gathered in the conference room. Williams addressed the group. We are here to discuss serious allegations of discrimination and professional misconduct against Mrs. Patricia Henderson. Principal Martinez has been conducting an investigation with approval from my office and the school board. Dr. Chen has completed an independent review. I want everyone to review the evidence and provide input on how to proceed. Dr. Chen presented her findings first. She had spent days analyzing classroom footage, student records, and grade distributions. Her report was thorough and damning. Over a 3-week period, I documented 38 separate incidents of disparate treatment. Dr. Chen explained. Students of color and students from low-income backgrounds consistently received harsher discipline, lower grades for comparable work, less attention during class discussions, and dismissive or demeaning feedback. She displayed graphs showing grade distributions. When I compare essays of similar quality, students of color received grades that were on average 1 full letter grade lower than white students. This pattern cannot be explained by random variation or subjective assessment. It shows systematic bias. She showed comparison charts. Maya's essay on the Grapes of Wrath scored C-. A white student's essay on the same book with similar structure and analysis scored a minus. Independent reviewers rated Maya's essay as equal or superior. Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, yesterday's classroom incident shows explicit discrimination. Mrs. Henderson directly told a student that her background makes her unsuitable for advanced academics. She suggested the student drop the class based not on actual performance, but on socioeconomic status. This violates district policy, state education law, and federal civil rights protections. Mark Stevens, the legal counsel, reviewed the evidence carefully. From a legal standpoint, we have substantial documentation of Title VI violations. This falls under racial discrimination in federally funded education programs. We also have potential violations of state anti-discrimination laws. If this goes to court, the district could face significant liability. David Park, the union representative, looked uncomfortable. His job was to protect teachers, but even he could see this situation was indefensible. I need to review everything carefully, he said. But based on what I am seeing, this appears to be a termination-level offense. The union will insist on proper procedure, but we cannot defend discriminatory behavior. Superintendent Williams nodded. Here is what we will do. First, we place Mrs. Henderson on immediate administrative leave today. Second, we conduct a formal disciplinary hearing within the next week. Third, we notify affected students and their families that we are addressing the situation. Fourth, we implement immediate remediation for students who received unfair grades. Martinez asked, how do we handle the camera footage? Do we tell Mrs. Henderson about it right away? Stevens answered, we will inform her that evidence was gathered through security cameras installed with proper legal authorization. We are not required to notify subjects of surveillance when it is conducted for legitimate institutional purposes. The cameras were installed following credible complaints and with school board approval. What about the students? Dr. Chen asked. Some of them have suffered real harm. Maya Kim in particular seems deeply affected. Williams made a note. We will meet with affected students and their families privately. We will offer counseling services, grade reviews, and assurances that we are taking this seriously. We need to rebuild their trust in this institution. The group spent another hour planning the details. They scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Henderson for 1 o'clock that afternoon. They prepared the documentation. They contacted the school board president to inform her of the situation. Martinez felt relieved that action was finally being taken, but he also felt guilty that it had taken so long. How many students had suffered over the years? How many had been discouraged from pursuing their dreams because of one teacher's prejudice? At noon, Maya's mother called the school requesting a meeting with Principal Martinez. She had taken time off work, which meant losing wages she could not afford to lose. But her daughter's well-being was more important than money. Martinez's secretary scheduled the meeting for 2 o'clock. After the meeting with Mrs. Henderson would be concluded, at 12:30 Jessica's mother also called. As an attorney, she identified herself and requested information about the school's discrimination complaint procedures. The secretary took her information and promised someone would return her call. At exactly 1 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson arrived at Principal Martinez's office. She had been told only that there was an important meeting regarding her classroom. She assumed it was about curriculum planning or perhaps a commendation for her years of service. She walked into the conference room and stopped short. The room was full of people: Principal Martinez, Superintendent Williams, Dr. Chen, Mr. Stevens, and Mr. Park. The atmosphere was formal and tense. "Please sit down." "Mrs. Henderson," Superintendent Williams said, gesturing to an empty chair. Mrs. Henderson sat slowly, her confident expression starting to fade. "What is this about?" she asked. Williams folded her hands on the table. "Mrs. Henderson, we are here to discuss serious concerns regarding your treatment of students. Specifically, we have evidence of discriminatory behavior based on race and socioeconomic status." Mrs. Henderson's face went pale, then flushed red. "That is absurd," she said. "I have been teaching at this school for 20 years. I treat all my students fairly." "We have evidence that suggests otherwise," Martinez said. He opened his laptop and turned the screen to face Mrs. Henderson. "For the past 3 weeks, we have been recording your classroom with a security camera. The camera was installed following multiple complaints and with full legal authorization." Mrs. Henderson looked shocked. "You have been spying on me?" "We have been documenting classroom behavior in response to credible allegations," Williams corrected. "What we found confirms a pattern of discriminatory treatment." Martinez played several clips from the footage. Mrs. Henderson watched herself ignore Maya's raised hand while calling on white students. She watched herself give harsh feedback to students of color while praising white students for similar work. She watched herself discipline minority students more severely than white students for the same behavior. With each clip, Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted between shock, denial, and growing panic. Finally, Martinez played yesterday's footage. Mrs. Henderson watched herself dismiss Maya's answer and make the comment about classes suited to Maya's background. She watched the private conversation after class where she suggested Maya drop advanced English because of her upbringing. The room was silent when the footage ended. Mrs. Henderson sat very still, her face now completely pale. "Do you have any response to what we have just shown you?" Williams asked. Mrs. Henderson seemed to be struggling to process what was happening. "I never meant anything racist," she said weakly. "I was just trying to help that girl be realistic about her abilities. By telling her that her background makes her unsuitable for advanced academics." Dr. Chen asked, "How is that helpful?" "Some students are just not prepared for this level of work," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice growing defensive. "It is not about race. It is about academic readiness." Stevens slid a document across the table. "This is a comparative analysis of student work. Students of color consistently received lower grades than white students for work of equal or superior quality. Independent reviewers confirmed this pattern. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Mrs. Henderson glanced at the document but did not really look at it. "I grade based on quality. If minority students are getting lower grades, maybe they need to work harder." The statement hung in the air. Even Mr. Park, the union representative, winced. "Mrs. Henderson," Williams said firmly, "what you just said demonstrates exactly the problem we are addressing. You are making assumptions about student ability and effort based on their race and economic background. That is the definition of discrimination." Mrs. Henderson's defensive anger was building. "This is political correctness run amok," she said, her voice rising. "You cannot even discipline students anymore without being called racist. I have high standards, and if some students cannot meet them, that is not my fault. High standards should apply equally to all students," Martinez said. "But the evidence shows you apply different standards based on who the student is, not what their work shows." Mrs. Henderson stood up abruptly. "I do not have to sit here and be accused like this. I have tenure. I have rights. My union will fight this." Mr. Park cleared his throat. "Mrs. Henderson, I strongly advise you to sit down and listen carefully to what the superintendent is about to tell you." Mrs. Henderson slowly sat back down, but her expression was hostile. Williams spoke in a calm but firm voice. Effective immediately, you are being placed on administrative leave. You will not be permitted on school grounds or to contact students. You will receive full pay during the investigation period. A formal disciplinary hearing will be scheduled within the next week. At that hearing, we will present all evidence and you will have the opportunity to respond with union representation. This is outrageous, Mrs. Henderson said. You are ruining my career over nothing. Over nothing, Dr. Chen repeated. You told a 14-year-old girl that she does not belong in advanced classes because of her background. You graded her work unfairly because of her race and economic status. You created a hostile learning environment that has caused real harm. These are not minor issues. Mrs. Henderson grabbed her purse and stood up again. I will be speaking with my attorney. The union will fight this. You will regret targeting a dedicated teacher who simply has high standards. You are welcome to consult an attorney, Williams said. But I strongly suggest you use this time to reflect on your behavior and its impact on students. The hearing will proceed regardless. Mrs. Henderson left the room without another word, slamming the door behind her. The group sat in silence for a moment. Martinez felt emotionally exhausted. Stevens made notes about Mrs. Henderson's statements during the meeting. Park shook his head sadly. That did not go as well as I hoped, Williams said. She is in complete denial about her behavior. She incriminated herself further, Stevens noted. Her statements in this meeting show a continued pattern of bias. That will make our case stronger. At 2 o'clock, Maya's mother arrived at the school. Martinez met her in his office along with Williams and Dr. Chen. They explained that they were investigating Mrs. Henderson's treatment of students and had found evidence of discrimination. Maya's mother started crying with relief. I thought I was failing my daughter, she said. I thought maybe she was not smart enough. But she is so smart. She tries so hard. Your daughter is extremely capable, Dr. Chen assured her. She has been subjected to unfair treatment that has nothing to do with her abilities. We are going to fix this. They explained that Maya's grades would be reviewed and adjusted as appropriate. They offered counseling services if Maya needed support. They promised that a new teacher would take over the class immediately. Will other families be told? Maya's mother asked. Other students have suffered too. We will be meeting with all affected families, Williams confirmed. We want to make this right for everyone. That afternoon, the school sent a letter to all parents in Mrs. Henderson's classes. The letter stated that the teacher had been placed on administrative leave due to personnel matters and that a substitute would be taking over immediately. The letter did not provide details but offered to meet with any concerned families. Maya came home from school to find her mother waiting with red eyes but a small smile. The principal called me to the school today, her mother said. They know what Mrs. Henderson has been doing. They are fixing it. Maya felt a wave of emotions, relief, validation, and lingering fear. What is going to happen to her? I do not know all the details, her mother said. But they are taking it very seriously. And they said your grades will be reviewed fairly. For the first time in months, Maya felt a small spark of hope. Maybe justice was possible after all. Maybe her hard work would finally be recognized. Maybe she did belong in that advanced English class. But she also knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. The formal disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Mrs. Patricia Henderson sat in her living room the night before, surrounded by papers and notes. She had hired an attorney named Richard Morrison, a man who specialized in defending teachers against disciplinary actions. Morrison had reviewed all the evidence that the school district had provided. He looked concerned when they met. Patricia, I need to be honest with you, he said. The evidence against you is substantial. The video footage is particularly damaging. My advice is to consider negotiating a resignation with benefits rather than fighting this. Absolutely not, Mrs. Henderson replied firmly. I have done nothing wrong. I have high academic standards and I refuse to apologize for that. If some students cannot meet those standards, that is not my fault. This is just political correctness and reverse discrimination. Morrison sighed. He had seen this kind of denial before. The video shows you making comments about students' backgrounds affecting their academic suitability. The grade analysis shows systematic disparities. This is not about academic standards. This is about treating students differently based on their race and economic status. I treat all students the same, Mrs. Henderson insisted. Those complaints come from students who want to blame someone else for their poor performance. What about the independent grade analysis? Morrison asked. Neutral educators rated minority students' work as equal to or better than white students' work, yet you gave them significantly lower grades. Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. Those reviewers do not know my students. They do not understand the context. I know what each student is capable of, and I grade accordingly. Morrison made more notes but did not argue further. He knew she would not listen. He would do his best to defend her at the hearing, but he also knew it was likely a losing battle. On Tuesday morning, the conference room at the district office was arranged like a formal hearing. At the front table sat Superintendent Williams, 2 school board members, and the district's legal counsel, Mark Stevens. Dr. Sarah Chen sat nearby with her evidence files. Principal Martinez was also present to provide testimony. Mrs. Henderson arrived with her attorney Morrison and her union representative, David Park. They sat at a table facing the panel. Mrs. Henderson wore a professional navy suit and carried herself with an air of confidence that seemed forced. Superintendent Williams called the hearing to order. This disciplinary hearing is being conducted according to district policy and state law. Mrs. Henderson, you have been charged with discrimination based on race and socioeconomic status, creating a hostile learning environment, professional misconduct, and violation of district policies regarding equal treatment of students. You have the right to hear all evidence against you, to present your own evidence and testimony, and to have union and legal representation. Do you understand these rights? Yes, Mrs. Henderson said stiffly. We will begin by presenting evidence, Williams said. She nodded to Principal Martinez. Martinez stood and approached the screen where the video footage would be displayed. Over a 3-week period, security cameras in Mrs. Henderson's classroom documented her interactions with students. What I'm about to show represents a pattern of behavior, not isolated incidents. He began playing the footage. The room watched in silence as clip after clip showed Mrs. Henderson ignoring raised hands of students of color while calling on white students. They watched her give harsh criticism to minority students while praising white students for similar contributions. They watched her discipline students differently based on their race. Mrs. Henderson shifted uncomfortably in her seat but said nothing. Her attorney took notes. The most damaging footage came last. The room watched Mrs. Henderson tell Maya that she should focus on classes suited to her background. They watched the private conversation where she suggested Maya was not prepared for advanced academics because of her upbringing. When the footage ended, Williams asked, Mrs. Henderson, do you dispute that this footage accurately shows what happened in your classroom? Morrison answered for her. We do not dispute that these conversations occurred. However, we maintain that Mrs. Henderson's comments were taken out of context and do not reflect discriminatory intent. Let us examine that claim, Dr. Chen said, standing up. She distributed copies of her report to everyone in the room. I conducted a comprehensive analysis of Mrs. Henderson's grading patterns. This chart shows grade distributions for white students versus students of color in her classes over the past semester. The chart was clear and damning. White students' average grade was B+, students of color average C-. The gap was too large to be explained by random variation. Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, I selected 15 essays from the most recent assignment and had them reviewed by 3 independent English teachers from other districts. The reviewers did not know the students' names, races, or economic backgrounds. They simply evaluated the quality of the writing and analysis. She displayed another chart. In 12 out of 15 cases, the independent reviewers gave students of color higher ratings than Mrs. Henderson gave them. In 8 cases, the reviewers rated minority students' essays as A or B quality, while Mrs. Henderson had given those same essays C or D grades. She held up 2 essays. This essay by Maya Kim received a C- from Mrs. Henderson, with comments about lacking sophistication. The 3 independent reviewers gave it grades of A-, B+, and A. This essay by Preston, a white student, received an A- from Mrs. Henderson. The independent reviewers gave it grades of B+, B, and B+. In other words, Maya's essay was objectively better, yet she received a much lower grade. Morrison stood up. Grade analysis can be subjective. Different teachers have different standards and different ways of evaluating student work. That does not prove discrimination. Taken alone, perhaps not, Stevens replied. But combined with the video evidence showing disparate treatment, The pattern of lower grades for comparable work from minority students, and Mrs. Henderson's own statements about students' backgrounds affecting their academic suitability, it creates a clear picture of systematic bias. Williams addressed Mrs. Henderson directly. Do you have any explanation for why students of color consistently receive lower grades in your classes for work that other educators rate as equal or superior quality? Mrs. Henderson finally spoke. I grade based on my knowledge of each student's potential. Some students have more natural ability than others. Some students come from families that value education and prepare their children properly. Other students come from backgrounds that do not emphasize academic achievement. I cannot be blamed for those differences. The room went silent. Even Morrison closed his eyes briefly, knowing his client had just made things much worse for herself. Are you saying that students from certain backgrounds have less natural ability? Williams asked carefully. I am saying that cultural and socioeconomic factors affect academic preparation, Mrs. Henderson replied. Students from educated, affluent families naturally perform better. Students from poverty or from certain cultural backgrounds often struggle with the sophisticated thinking required for advanced work. Certain cultural backgrounds, Dr. Chen repeated. Can you be more specific about which cultural backgrounds you believe produce students who struggle with sophisticated thinking? Mrs. Henderson seemed to realize she was digging herself into a hole, but she could not stop. I am not trying to be offensive. I am simply stating facts. Asian students often excel because their culture values education. But other groups, particularly students from poor backgrounds or certain minority communities, do not have the same cultural emphasis on academic achievement. Morrison put his hand on Mrs. Henderson's arm, trying to get her to stop talking, but she continued. The Jode family in the Grapes of Wrath struggled because they lacked education and sophistication, Mrs. Henderson said. When Maya Kim writes about that book from a personal perspective of poverty, she cannot be objective. She sees it through her own biased lens. Students who come from educated backgrounds can analyze the text more objectively. Williams leaned forward. So you believe that Maya Kim's personal experience with economic hardship makes her less capable of analyzing literature about economic hardship? I believe it makes her less objective, Mrs. Henderson said. Or perhaps it gives her deeper insight, Martinez said quietly. Perhaps her lived experience allows her to see things that students from privileged backgrounds might miss. That is not sophisticated analysis, Mrs. Henderson argued. That is personal opinion masquerading as literary criticism. Dr. Chen shook her head. Actually, contemporary literary theory highly values the role of reader perspective and lived experience in textual analysis. What you are calling unsophisticated is actually a well-established critical approach. The school board members asked questions. One asked about Mrs. Henderson's comments to Jessica Park, where she said Jessica was different from Maya because Jessica's family understood the value of education. Both girls are Korean American, the board member noted. Both are smart and hardworking. The only significant difference is that Jessica's family is wealthy and Maya's family is poor. You told Jessica she was different in a positive way, while telling Maya her background made her unsuitable for advanced classes. How is that not discrimination based on socioeconomic status? Mrs. Henderson's face flushed. Jessica has advantages that Maya does not have. That is just reality. But you punished Maya for not having those advantages, the board member said. You gave her lower grades not because her work was inferior, but because you believed her background made her less capable. That is the definition of discrimination. Morrison tried to redirect. My client has high standards for all students. If some students perceive her expectations as unfair, that is unfortunate, but it does not constitute discrimination. Stevens pulled out another document. We have statements from former students of Mrs. Henderson describing similar patterns of behavior going back years. Here is a statement from Lena Johnson, who graduated 2 years ago. She describes receiving a C in Mrs. Henderson's class despite being an excellent student in all her other classes. She is now an English major in college with a 3.8 GPA. She describes the same patterns of being ignored, dismissed, and graded more harshly than white students. He pulled out more statements. We have similar accounts from 5 other former students, all students of color or students from low-income backgrounds. This is not a one-time misunderstanding. This is a pattern of behavior spanning years. Morrison looked increasingly uncomfortable. He knew his client's case was falling apart. Williams addressed Mrs. Henderson again. Do you understand that what you have described in this hearing is discriminatory? You have stated that students from certain backgrounds are less capable of sophisticated thinking. You have admitted to grading based on your perception of student potential rather than the actual quality of their work. You have acknowledged treating students differently based on their socioeconomic status. I have been teaching for 20 years, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice rising with emotion. I have dedicated my life to education. I have high standards because I want students to succeed. If you fire me for having standards, you are telling every teacher in this district that excellence does not matter anymore. This is not about standards, Williams said firmly. This is about applying those standards equally to all students regardless of their race or economic background. You have failed to do that. You have created a hostile learning environment where students of color and poor students are made to feel they do not belong in advanced classes. You have damaged students' confidence and potentially affected their academic futures. These are serious violations of professional ethics and legal protections. Mrs. Henderson stood up abruptly. I refuse to be vilified for being a good teacher. You are all too concerned with political correctness to care about actual education. Fine. I will resign, but know that you are making a huge mistake. Without teachers like me who maintain high standards, this school will become mediocre. Mrs. Henderson, Morrison said urgently, please sit down and let me handle this. But Mrs. Henderson was done. I will not sit here and be lectured about how to do my job by people who care more about feelings than facts. I'm resigning effective immediately. You can have this school. I hope you are happy when student achievement drops because no one wants to hold students accountable anymore. She grabbed her purse and walked out of the hearing room, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Morrison stood up slowly. I apologize for my client's outburst. However, since she has resigned, I assume this hearing is concluded. Williams exchanged glances with the legal counsel. Stevens spoke carefully. While Mrs. Henderson has verbally resigned, we still need to complete this process formally. Based on the evidence presented, we would have recommended termination for cause. However, we will accept a formal resignation in lieu of termination. Mrs. Henderson will need to submit written resignation within 24 hours. She will not be eligible for rehire in this district. Additionally, Stevens continued, we will be reporting this case to the State Board of Education. Based on the severity of the discrimination and professional misconduct, we will recommend that her teaching credentials be revoked. Morrison nodded grimly. He had hoped to negotiate a quiet resignation that would allow his client to teach elsewhere. But Mrs. Henderson's behavior in the hearing had made that impossible. The hearing concluded. Principal Martinez felt both relieved and sad. Justice was being served, but it had taken too long. How many students had been hurt over the years? That afternoon, Superintendent Williams called an emergency meeting with the families of affected students. Maya and her mother attended, along with James and his family, Priya and her parents, Miguel and his grandmother, and several other families. Williams addressed the group directly. I want to begin by apologizing. Our school system failed your children. We allowed a teacher to create a discriminatory environment that harmed students over an extended period. That is unacceptable, and we take full responsibility. She explained what had happened at the hearing. She confirmed that Mrs. Henderson was no longer employed by the district and would likely lose her teaching credentials. More importantly, Williams continued, we are implementing immediate changes to ensure this never happens again. We will conduct equity audits of all teachers' grading patterns. We will provide mandatory training on bias and discrimination. We will create a confidential system for students to report concerns. And we will hold all staff accountable for creating inclusive learning environments. Maya's mother raised her hand. What about my daughter's grades? She worked so hard and she was graded unfairly. All affected students' grades will be reviewed by an independent committee, Dr. Chen explained. We will have neutral educators reevaluate assignments and adjust grades as appropriate. This will happen within the next 2 weeks. The families asked many questions. They wanted to know why it took so long to address the problem. They wanted assurances that their children would not face retaliation. They wanted to know what would happen next in their English classes. Principal Martinez addressed this last concern. We have hired an excellent teacher, Mr. Thomas Chen, to take over the advanced English classes. He comes highly recommended and has a strong track record of working with diverse students. He will meet with each class this week to establish expectations and rebuild trust. As the meeting ended, Several families approached Williams and Martinez to thank them for taking action, but there was also anger and pain. Years of damage could not be erased overnight. Maya walked out of the meeting with her mother. She felt validated but also emotionally exhausted. Justice had been served, but the wounds remained. She wondered if she would ever feel truly confident in an English classroom again. What she did not know yet was that healing was possible. And sometimes the people who hurt us create an opportunity for others to show us what good teaching really looks like. 2 weeks after Mrs. Henderson's resignation, the Independent Grade Review Committee completed their work. The committee consisted of 3 experienced English teachers from different school districts who had no connection to Riverside High School. They reviewed every assignment from every affected student in Mrs. Henderson's classes from the entire semester. Principal Martinez called Maya and her mother to his office on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Chen was also present. They sat around a small table with folders containing the review committee's findings. Maya, Martinez began gently, "We have completed the review of your work. I want you to know that the committee was very impressed with the quality of your writing and analysis." He opened the folder and showed Maya the revised grades. Her C- essays had been changed to A's and A-. Her D+ assignments were now B's. Her overall grade in English went from a C average to an A-. Maya stared at the papers in disbelief. Her mother started crying quietly beside her. "These are the grades you earned," Dr. Chen said softly. "These reflect the actual quality of your work. What Mrs. Henderson gave you was based on bias, not on your abilities." "My GPA," Maya said slowly, her mind calculating. "This changes my whole GPA." Martinez nodded. "Your cumulative GPA has increased significantly. You now rank in the top 15% of your class. This will make a real difference for college applications." Maya felt tears streaming down her face. They were tears of relief and validation and grief for all the time she had spent doubting herself. Her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "I am so proud of you," her mother whispered. "You never gave up even when it was hard. Even when someone tried to make you believe you were not good enough." Similar meetings were happening with other affected families. James's grades were adjusted from D's and C's to B's and A's. Priya's work was reevaluated, and her grade went from C+ to A. Miguel's grades improved dramatically. In total, 17 students had their grades significantly adjusted upward. But grades were not the only thing that needed fixing. The emotional harm ran deep. Many students had lost confidence. Some had started to believe they were not smart enough for advanced classes. Others had developed anxiety about speaking up in class. The school district offered free counseling to all affected students. Maya attended several sessions with the school counselor, Mrs. Lewis, a kind woman with warm brown eyes who really listened. What Mrs. Henderson did was wrong, Mrs. Lewis told Maya during their first session. "But I want you to understand something important. Her behavior was about her own biases and limitations, not about you. You are intelligent, capable, and deserving of being in advanced classes." Maya nodded, but the words were hard to fully believe yet. Months of being told she was not good enough had left deep scars. "It will take time to rebuild your confidence," Mrs. Lewis acknowledged. "That is normal. But I want you to start recognizing your own strengths. Every time you notice yourself thinking something negative about your abilities, I want you to challenge that thought. Ask yourself, is this true, or is this Mrs. Henderson's voice in my head?" Over the following weeks, Maya worked on separating her actual abilities from the false narrative Mrs. Henderson had created. It was hard work, but slowly she started to believe in herself again. Meanwhile, a new teacher arrived at Riverside High School. Mr. Thomas Chen was 32 years old, a Korean-American man who had grown up in a working-class family and worked his way through college. He understood what it meant to be underestimated. He understood what good teaching looked like. On his first day with the advanced English class, Mr. Chen stood at the front of the room with a gentle smile. The students sat tensely, not sure what to expect. "I know you have all been through a difficult experience," Mr. Chen began. "I want to start by acknowledging that. What happened in this classroom before I arrived was wrong. It should never have happened, and I am sorry you had to go through it." He pulled up a chair and sat down, making himself level with the students rather than standing over them. "Here is what I believe about teaching. Every student in this room has value. Every student has insights worth hearing. My job is not to judge you or rank you or make you feel small. My job is to help you develop your skills and discover what you are capable of. Maya watched him carefully, wanting to trust him, but afraid to. I also want to be clear about expectations, Mr. Chen continued. I do have high standards. I will push you to think deeply and write clearly, but I will apply those standards fairly to everyone, and I will never ever judge you based on where you come from or what your background is. All I care about is your effort and your growth. He stood up and wrote on the board. Everyone has a story worth telling. That is the theme for the rest of our semester, he said. We are going to read diverse voices. We are going to study literature from different cultures and perspectives, and you are going to write about things that matter to you. I want to hear your voices, not what you think I want to hear. The class was quiet for a moment. Then Jessica raised her hand. Mr. Chen, what if we are still affected by what happened before? What if it is hard for some of us to trust that things will be different now? Mr. Chen nodded appreciatively. That is a completely valid concern. Trust has to be earned, not demanded. I do not expect you to trust me just because I say nice things. Watch what I do. See how I treat everyone in this class. If you see me being unfair or biased, I want you to call me out. I promise to listen and to do better. Over the next weeks, Mr. Chen proved he meant what he said. When Maya raised her hand, he called on her. When she gave thoughtful answers, he acknowledged them genuinely. When she struggled with an assignment, he offered supportive feedback that helped her improve rather than criticism that made her feel inadequate. He assigned an essay on finding your voice in literature. Maya wrote about how books had been her escape when life was hard. She wrote about characters who struggled with poverty and how their stories made her feel less alone. She wrote honestly about her own experiences. She hesitated before turning it in. The essay was personal and vulnerable. What if Mr. Chen thought it was too emotional, just like Mrs. Henderson had said? But when she got the essay back, it had an A at the top. Mr. Chen's comments filled the margins. Powerful insight. I love how you connect personal experience to textual analysis. Your perspective adds depth that many readers miss. This is excellent work, Maya. Maya read the comments 3 times, crying a little. This was what good teaching looked like. This was what she deserved all along. Mr. Chen did not just praise students without cause. He gave constructive criticism when work needed improvement. But his criticism was specific, helpful, and equally applied to all students. When Maya made an error, he pointed it out kindly and showed her how to fix it. When white students made errors, he did the same thing. Slowly, the classroom environment transformed. Students started participating more actively in discussions. James began raising his hand regularly and sharing insightful interpretations. Priya started staying after class to discuss poetry with Mr. Chen. Miguel wrote an essay about his family's immigration story that moved the whole class. The school district followed through on their promises for systemic change. They implemented quarterly equity audits where administrators reviewed grade distributions and discipline records for all teachers, looking for patterns of bias. Teachers who showed concerning patterns received additional training and monitoring. All district staff attended mandatory training on implicit bias and culturally responsive teaching. The training was not just a one-time lecture, but an ongoing program with regular workshops and discussions. The school created a student equity committee made up of students from diverse backgrounds. The committee met monthly to discuss concerns and make recommendations for improving school climate. Maya and Jessica both joined the committee. At one meeting, Jessica proposed creating a mentorship program where older students who had faced discrimination could support younger students going through similar experiences. The administration approved the idea, and Maya became one of the first mentors. She met weekly with a freshman named Sophia, a Latina girl from a low-income family who was struggling in her classes. Maya shared her own story and helped Sophia recognize that she belonged in advanced classes, despite what anyone might suggest. You are smart enough, Maya told Sophia firmly. Do not let anyone make you doubt that. And if a teacher ever treats you unfairly, you speak up. We have systems now to protect students. Use them. 6 months after Mrs. Henderson's resignation, the State Board of Education held a hearing to review her teaching credentials. Based on the evidence from Riverside High School and the investigation, the board voted to revoke her credentials. She would not be able to teach in the state again. Some people argued this was too harsh. They said she had made mistakes but did not deserve to lose her career. But Principal Martinez and Superintendent Williams stood firm. Teachers had tremendous power over students' lives and futures. That power had to be used responsibly. Mrs. Henderson had 20 years to change her behavior, William said at a school board meeting. She chose not to. She hurt countless students with her bias. She had to be held accountable not just for what she did, but to send a message that this behavior will not be tolerated in our schools. The case became a training example in education administration programs across the state. It showed the importance of taking student complaints seriously, documenting evidence carefully, and following through with appropriate consequences. By the end of the school year, Maya's confidence had rebuilt significantly. Her final grades were excellent across all her classes. Mr. Chen wrote a glowing recommendation letter for her, highlighting her resilience, insight, and academic excellence. On the last day of school, Mr. Chen asked Maya to stay after class for a moment. She felt a flutter of worry, even though she knew he was nothing like Mrs. Henderson. "I wanted to tell you something," Mr. Chen said. "I have been teaching for 8 years. I have had many talented students, but you are one of the most impressive young people I have ever worked with." Maya felt herself blushing. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I am not just saying that to be nice," he continued. "What you went through this year would have broken many students. But you kept fighting. You kept believing in yourself even when someone tried to convince you that you were not capable. That takes incredible strength." He handed her a book. It was a collection of essays by writers from diverse backgrounds. "I want you to have this. These are voices that were often dismissed or underestimated, just like you were. But they persisted, and they changed literature. I think you will change things too." Maya held the book carefully. "Mr. Chen, can I ask you something?" "Of course, and why did you become a teacher?" Mr. Chen smiled. "Because when I was in high school, I had a teacher who did not believe in me. He told me that students from my background should focus on practical careers, not aim for universities. He tried to discourage me from taking advanced classes." Maya's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I proved him wrong," Mr. Chen said simply. "I worked hard, got into a good college, earned my teaching degree, and I became the kind of teacher I needed when I was your age. I became someone who sees potential in every student, regardless of where they come from." "That is what I want to do too," Maya said suddenly, surprising herself. "I want to be a doctor, but I also want to help people who are underestimated. I want to prove that people like us belong in any field we choose." "You already are proving that," Mr. Chen said, "and I have no doubt you will continue to do amazing things." That summer, Maya worked at her family's neighborhood grocery store to help pay for college application fees. She spent her free time studying and reading. She volunteered at a free health clinic in her community, cementing her desire to become a doctor. In the fall of her sophomore year, Maya's English class read essays about social justice. The teacher asked students to write about a time they witnessed or experienced injustice. Maya wrote about her experience with Mrs. Henderson, though she changed the names and details. She wrote about the pain of being told she did not belong. She wrote about the importance of having allies like Jessica who spoke up. She wrote about the courage it takes to report discrimination. She wrote about the healing that came from having a good teacher who believed in her. Her essay was selected for the school's literary magazine. When it was published, several students approached Maya to thank her for telling the story. One girl told Maya that she had been experiencing similar treatment from a teacher, but was afraid to report it. Maya encouraged her to speak up and offered to go with her to talk to the principal. The girl reported the teacher, an investigation was conducted, and the teacher received disciplinary action and additional training. The systems that were put in place after Mrs. Henderson's case were working to protect students. Maya graduated high school 2.5 years later as valedictorian. She had been accepted to multiple universities with full scholarships. She chose a prestigious university with a strong pre-med program. At her graduation speech, Maya stood at the podium in her blue gown and looked out at the audience. Her parents sat in the front row, her mother crying with pride. Principal Martinez sat on the stage behind her. Mr. Chen sat in the audience smiling. "When I started at this school," Maya began, "someone tried to convince me that I did not belong here. Someone tried to make me believe that students from my background were not capable of academic excellence. That person was wrong." She saw several teachers shifting uncomfortably, but she continued, "I am standing here today as valedictorian not because of natural talent or privilege. I am here because I worked hard, because I refused to give up, and because eventually, People in power chose to believe me and other students when we said something was wrong. She looked directly at Principal Martinez. Thank you to the administrators who listened and took action. Thank you for showing students that our voices matter and that justice is possible. She looked at Mr. Chen. Thank you to the teachers who see potential in every student, who challenge us to grow while also supporting us, who understand that good teaching means high standards and high support together. She looked at Jessica, sitting with her family. Thank you to the friends who stand up for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. Allies matter. Maya took a breath. I want every student in this audience, especially students who look like me or come from backgrounds like mine, to know this. You belong in advanced classes. You belong in leadership positions. You belong in any career field you choose. Your dreams are valid. Your voice matters. And if anyone tries to convince you otherwise, they are wrong about you, not the other way around. The audience erupted in applause. Her mother was crying openly now. Several students of color in the graduating class stood up, applauding. Faculty members joined them. Maya continued. Injustice happens. People with power sometimes misuse it. Systems sometimes fail us. But change is possible when we speak up, when others listen, and when we all commit to doing better. That is what I learned these past 4 years. That is what I will carry forward as I go into medicine. I will be the kind of doctor who sees every patient as deserving of respect and excellent care, regardless of their background. I will be someone who stands up against injustice. I hope all of us will be that kind of person in whatever field we choose. She closed with her class motto, the one the students had chosen. Stronger together, unstoppable always. After the ceremony, many people approached Maya. Parents of other students thanked her for speaking up years ago, saying it had made the school better for their children. Younger students asked for advice. Teachers congratulated her. Principal Martinez shook her hand firmly. Maya, I want you to know that your courage changed this school. The policies we implemented because of your situation have protected many other students. You made a real difference.